Have you ever wondered if the man behind the horror stories has his own terrifying experiences? Tonight we explore the true strange events that happened to Mr. Nightmare himself. Moments that are too chilling to be fiction. This isn't just a story. This is his reality. I have named my first story The Midnight Whisper and the next story The Shadowed Secret of Mr. Nightmare. So let's begin the story. The Midnight Whisper. In the world of online horror, Mr. Nightmare stands as a legend. Known for his deep voice and chilling storytelling, he brings some of the most unsettling tales from across the internet to life. His listeners, from teens to adults, tune in religiously for the spine-chilling experiences, strange encounters, and ghostly happenings he narrates. Each story transports his audience to eerie, haunted places, often leaving them looking over their shoulders, questioning every shadow in their rooms. But what if during one of these late-night sessions, he encountered a horror story that wasn't scripted, something truly supernatural? One stormy autumn night, Mr. Nightmare was in his recording studio, preparing to bring his fans another eerie tale. It was his routine to record late at night when the world was asleep and the darkness seemed thicker, almost alive. It helped create the perfect atmosphere, setting the tone for his haunting stories. Outside, the rain beat heavily against his window, and the occasional flash of lightning briefly illuminated his dimly lit room. The ambiance was ideal for the unsettling narrative he was about to record. As he set up his equipment, a strange feeling crept over him, like he was being watched. He brushed it off, chuckling to himself. Spending so much time with ghost stories and creepy Reddit tales could mess with anyone's head. He started recording, his smooth, deep voice weaving a story of a haunted farmhouse, when suddenly, he heard something. A faint, soft sound, almost like crying. He paused, removing his headphones. The sobbing was so faint that at first he wondered if he was imagining it. But as he listened closely, the sound grew clearer. It was a soft, childlike cry, muffled, as if coming from far away. He told himself it was probably just the wind or perhaps the rain leaking through a draft. Yet, the sound continued, persistent and heart-wrenching. Trying to ignore it, he resumed his narration, but within seconds the cry grew louder, closer, almost as if it was moving towards him. Each sob was filled with despair, tugging at his heart in a way he couldn't explain. It sounded so real, so desperate, like a soul crying out in anguish. Unable to concentrate, he stopped recording and took off his headphones. This time he was certain the sound was coming from the hallway, just outside his studio door. A shiver ran down his spine. He debated whether to investigate, but told himself it was probably nothing, just his mind playing tricks on him. But then, the sobbing grew louder still, and this time he felt it. A cold draft, almost icy, seeped into the room, chilling him to the bone. The door to his studio, which he was sure he had shut tight, was now slightly ajar. Taking a deep breath, he approached the door and slowly opened it wider, peering into the dark hallway. Only the faint glow of a single light at the far end illuminated the space, casting eerie shadows that seemed to shift and flicker. There was no one there, just the empty corridor, quiet and foreboding. Yet the crying persisted, echoing down the hall, beckoning him, pulling him forward. Mr. Nightmare's pulse quickened as he stepped into the hallway. He followed the sound, his footsteps muffled on the old, creaking floorboards. With each step, the sobbing grew more intense, filling the silence with an unbearable sadness. He could feel the weight of it pressing down on him, wrapping around him, like an invisible shroud. Finally, he reached the end of the hallway, where an old wooden door he had never noticed before stood slightly open. A sliver of darkness peeked through, darker than any shadow he had ever seen, as if it led to a place untouched by light. The crying was coming from within. He hesitated, his hand hovering over the handle, every instinct screaming at him to turn back. But there was something about that cry, a helplessness, a plea that he couldn't ignore. Steeling himself, he pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was cold, impossibly cold. His breath puffed out in small white clouds, and his skin prickled with goosebumps. It was pitch black, the air thick and heavy, filled with an overwhelming sense of sorrow. He fumbled for his phone, switching on the flashlight, but the beam barely pierced the darkness, revealing only the faint outline of old furniture and dusty walls. And then, the crying stopped. The silence was deafening, pressing in on him from all sides. Just as he was about to turn and leave, a soft whisper echoed through the room. "Help me." The voice was fragile, trembling, like someone barely clinging to life. It was a child's voice, filled with fear and pain, and it sent a chill straight through his heart. He spun around, aiming his flashlight in every direction, but there was no one there. He took a step back, his hand reaching for the door handle when he felt it, a cold, skeletal hand grazing his shoulder. He froze, his heart pounding wildly. Slowly he turned, expecting to see a face, but there was nothing. Just an empty room, silent and still. Panicking, he stumbled back, slamming the door shut behind him and racing back to his studio. He locked the door, his chest heaving, his mind racing, trying to process what had just happened. For a moment he sat there in silence, trying to convince himself it was all a hallucination, a trick of the mind brought on by too many late nights and too many horror stories. But then he remembered. He had left his microphone recording the entire time. With trembling hands, he put on his headphones and pressed play. His own voice filled his ears, calm and composed as he narrated the story he'd planned. But then, as he listened, the faint sound of crying crept into the audio, growing louder and louder, just as he'd heard it in real life. And then, just before he stopped the recording, a whisper, a soft, haunting plea. "Help me." The voice was there, captured on the audio, proof that he hadn't imagined it. And then, just as he was about to take off the headphones, he heard something else, a faint, breathy voice, so close it sounded as if it was whispering directly into his ear. "I'll be back. For you." His blood ran cold. Title: The Shadowed Secrets of Mr. Nightmare. It was a chilly October evening when Mr. Nightmare, known for sharing spine-chilling real-life horror stories, decided to take his own tale up a notch. Inspired by numerous fan requests, he had come to Evergreen Manor, a mysterious, abandoned mansion on the outskirts of Pennsylvania. The mansion had a dark past, and locals often spoke in hushed tones of the chilling occurrences surrounding it. People whispered about shadowy figures in its windows, eerie noises that echoed from within, and strange disappearances of those who dared to stay too long. As he stepped out of his car, the setting sun cast long shadows over the desolate building, making it appear even more sinister. Mr. Nightmare took a deep breath, adjusting his backpack and voice recorder. He was determined to capture first-hand experiences for his followers, something authentic and raw. His videos typically narrated tales shared by others, But tonight, he would document his own adventure. He walked up the crumbling stone steps, the crunch of dried leaves beneath his boots resonating in the silence. Pausing at the entrance, he could already feel the air around him growing heavy, as though the manor itself were holding its breath, waiting. He reached for the doorknob, but before his hand even touched it, the door creaked open on its own, revealing a dark hallway. "Perfect setting for a nightmare," he muttered to himself, flicking on his flashlight. Inside, the mansion was shrouded in shadows, the walls lined with peeling wallpaper, and the air smelled of dampness and decay. Dust motes danced in the beam of his flashlight, creating an eerie, almost magical atmosphere. As he moved deeper into the house, he could feel an unsettling presence lurking just beyond his field of vision. It was as though the house was watching him, studying his every move. He began recording, his voice low but steady. "All right, guys. This place is more than what I expected. You can practically feel the weight of the past here. I can see why people think this place is haunted." Suddenly, there was a faint whisper, just on the edge of his hearing. He froze, holding his breath, straining to listen. The whisper came again, this time clearer, soft, almost pleading. "Leave." Chills ran down his spine, but he ignored the warning, chalking it up to his imagination. "Just an old house, making old house sounds," he told himself, moving toward the staircase. The steps groaned under his weight as he ascended, the sound echoing through the empty halls. Reaching the second floor, he found a row of doors, each leading to a different room. He opened the first door, revealing a dusty bedroom with a large mirror on the wall. As he scanned the room, his flashlight reflected in the mirror, casting odd, distorted shadows across the walls. Then, for a split second, he saw it. A figure standing in the corner, just barely visible in the edge of the mirror's reflection. He whipped around, but there was no one there. Heart pounding, he steadied his breath and approached the mirror, studying it closely. "Did you guys see that?" he whispered into his recorder, his voice trembling slightly. It looked like a person. Suddenly, his flashlight flickered, casting the room into momentary darkness. When the light came back on, the figure was gone, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Deciding to press on, he left the room, closing the door behind him. He moved down the hall, opening another door. This one led to what appeared to be a study, with a large, dust-covered desk and shelves lined with ancient books. As he approached the desk, he noticed an old journal lying open, its yellowed pages filled with messy, frantic handwriting. Curiosity piqued, he began to read. The entries were dated over 100 years ago and told of a man who had once lived in the manor, a reclusive figure who had become obsessed with communicating with spirits. The final entry sent chills through him. "They're here, watching me. They whisper in the shadows. They will never let me leave." The words were enough to make Mr. Nightmare feel as though the walls were closing in on him. He heard a faint creak from the hallway, as though someone were walking just outside the room. His heart raced as he turned, expecting to see someone or something standing there. But the hall was empty. "All right, maybe I'm letting this place get to me," he muttered, forcing a chuckle. But deep down, he knew this was more than just nerves. There was something in this house, something that didn't want him there. Continuing his exploration, he came to the last door at the end of the hall. It was different from the others. Larger, more ornate, with strange carvings etched into the wood. He hesitated before opening it, a part of him sensing that whatever lay beyond this door was the source of the house's dark energy. Pushing the door open, he stepped into a large room dominated by a grand fireplace. The walls were adorned with faded portraits, their eyes seeming to follow him as he moved. In the center of the room stood a wooden chair, facing away from him. He felt a cold breeze pass by, despite the lack of any open windows. As he took a step forward, his flashlight dimmed, and the room was plunged into darkness. He fumbled with the light, his pulse quickening as he heard soft footsteps approaching him from behind. Turning quickly, he shone his flashlight around the room, but no one was there. Yet he could feel the presence closer than ever, a cold, suffocating sensation wrapping around him. Suddenly he heard the whisper again, louder this time. "Leave, or stay forever." He felt a chill run down his spine, his body frozen in fear. He was no longer alone in the room. Gathering his courage, he spoke into his recorder. "If anyone, if anything is here with me, show yourself." The silence stretched, heavy and oppressive. Then, from the shadows, a figure began to materialize, a dark silhouette, its face obscured, but its eyes glowed with an unnatural light. Mr. Nightmare backed away slowly, heart pounding, unable to tear his gaze away from the figure. The figure took a step toward him, and he could feel a wave of despair and terror wash over him. Desperate, he turned and bolted for the door, racing down the hallway and stumbling down the stairs. The house seemed to come alive around him. The walls creaked, the air grew colder, and he could hear the whispers growing louder, echoing his every step. As he reached the front door, it slammed shut in his face. Panicked, he grabbed the doorknob, twisting and pulling with all his strength. The whispers grew deafening, filling his mind with 1,000 voices, all chanting the same thing. "Stay, stay, stay." With a final burst of adrenaline, he yanked the door open and stumbled outside, gasping for air as he felt the oppressive presence lift. He didn't look back as he ran to his car, jumping inside and locking the doors. He sat there, breathing heavily, his heart racing as he tried to process what had just happened. The mansion loomed behind him, dark and foreboding, its secrets hidden once more. As he drove away, he glanced in his rearview mirror, half expecting to see the figure watching him from one of the windows. But the house remained silent, shrouded in shadow. Later that night, he reviewed his recording, hoping to find some rational explanation for what he had experienced. But as he listened, his blood ran cold. In the background of his own voice, he could hear the whispers, faint, almost imperceptible, but unmistakably real. "Stay, stay, stay." With trembling hands, he shut off the recorder. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, hit the bell icon, and stay updated. Like, comment, and share to support us. Stick around for more chilling stories.